Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. These interviewed are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to past, present, and future legends, as well as business owners, employees, media, and land use warriors. Men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle we call off-road. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active in off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world that we live and love and call off-road. This episode of Conversations with Big Rich is brought to you by the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. The mission of the Hall of Fame is to educate and inspire present and future generations of the off-road community by celebrating the achievements of those who came before. We invite you to help fulfill the mission of the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. Join, partner, or donate today. Legends live at ORMHOF.org. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, I'm interviewing Larry Miner. Larry started his off-road career during a trip to Glamis in 1959. Shortly after that, Larry started his racing addiction. Over the years, Larry teamed up with other ORMHOF inductees such as Herman Booy, Rodney Hall, Bill Stroppe. Between off-road, sand, and drag racing, Larry Miner has made quite a name for himself. So we're going to talk to Larry and find out all about his career. Larry, thank you so much for coming on board and spending some time.
Thank you, Rich.
So let's get started right away with the easiest question in the world. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in the Hemet San Jacinto Valley. I'd lived there my whole life, all 83 years.
Wow, all the time in Hemet.
That's correct.
And back in when you were born, Hemet was pretty rural. I mean, it's still kind of rural, but it's getting that spread from LA. But back then, there must have been quite a bit of room out there.
It was mostly a farming community. My dad was a farmer, and I was a farmer. And it was a real rural farming area, not heavily populated. I know when I graduated from high school in '59, we had one high school, and there was 80 graduates there. Now we have 4 high schools, and about 800 in each high school graduate every year. And our population back then for the Hemet San Jacinto Valley was only about 7,000. So it has really changed.
Yeah, I would imagine it has now. That's quite a difference from one class of 80 to 4 classes of like 800. That's huge. So
yes, it is.
So let's talk about those early years. You working on the farm. What kind of farming was done back then for you guys?
Well, mainly we were potato farmers, and we farmed. My dad liked the Southern California area, and I capitalized on that because we have so many different climatic conditions here in Southern California. We have the beach area where it's cool, the mountains, and the desert. So we bought ranches in 4 different counties here in Southern California, and we farmed potatoes 12 months out of the year. We were either planting or harvesting 12 months out of the year.
That's amazing, because I've spent some time in Idaho, and the seasons aren't quite that accommodating.
Yes, and all our potatoes were fresh packed. Whatever we harvested that day was sold. We harvest according to the sales, and of course we were a complete organization. We did all our own sales and had our own staff, and we shipped all over the United States and even overseas to Taiwan and the world.
Wow. So are the rumors true that you guys used to sell to McDonald's?
No, they are not true. I never sold one potato to McDonald's.
Okay. So you've heard it here, everyone. I was reading online and your name came up, and it was somebody was saying, "Oh yeah, potatoes and McDonald's. That's Larry," and I'm like, I thought all those came out of Idaho, but I didn't know for sure.
Yeah, that's right. It's a completely different variety.
Right. And so, knowing a little bit about, I'm not a potato snob by any means. I do like a good russet baker, a nice big one. But What kind of potatoes did you guys grow
Well,
primarily?
we grew. I always call them russet potatoes because they came out of storage and they got the big old brown skin on them. I call them wooden potatoes, but we farmed three different varieties. We farmed the white rose potato, and then we farmed the yellow called Yukon Golds, and then we farmed a red potato. So we had all three varieties that we packed. They
Okay,
were all fresh.
excellent. And how long did that carry on?
Well, my dad started the business in 1943, and I carried on. He passed in '88. I carried on up to just a couple years ago, and I'm getting older, and it's hard to work, and nobody wanted to run the big business. None of my kids that I have now wanted to do anything that large, so we quit growing, and we turned our company more into a land leasing and land management business. We still own all our ranches, but we lease them out to other farmers and all, because all our ranches have water on it.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's excellent because then you get make money off the property and not have to do any digging.
Yes.
I understand that part. As you get older, the physical labor is not so appealing anymore.
And of all the things I've done in my life, Rich, the racing, and people ask me, do you miss the racing? Do you miss this? I think I miss growing the potatoes more than anything else.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. Excellent. That's the kind of stuff we want to hear. So, what is it that was so appealing about and what you miss about doing that? Is it just getting out there and doing the hard work?
Yeah, getting up in the morning, go out in the fields, dig down with my hands and look at the tubers and how they were setting and everything. And the crops we were harvesting, I'd go out where we were harvesting. I'd see them harvesting, and I'd go back to our packing shed and see them packing in the packing shed, and just the whole operation, the farming part.
Excellent. Excellent. So, did you go to school beyond high school for agriculture, or did you just pick it up from the family business and go gung ho?
I went to 1 year of college, and of course, it wasn't for me. And my dad needed me in the business, and so I went to work right away out of high school. I always worked on the farm. My dad put me on the field when I was 12 years old, and I was picking potatoes and making $15 a week.
Nice. Not quite as much as back then as the racing career became later, but although I don't know about racing careers making a whole lot of money either, unless like nowadays it's NASCAR or something. So let's talk about the racing. And I know that your first trip to Glamis is what got you bit. Is that true?
Not really. For some reason, it was just built into me that I loved things with motors and to build them. And I think my first little hot rod I built, well, no, I'll go back further than that. We lived in the rural country. We had a horse, and my mom would send me to the grocery store to get groceries on my horse. Well, I was coming back, and I got home, and my little dog Spotty usually goes with me, and he wasn't there. So I rode back to find him, and he got run over by a car. So I brought him home, and it broke his back. We nursed him back to health, but he couldn't walk in his back half. So I took some wheels off of a tricycle I had, and I made him a little carrier, so he put you could put the back end of the dog in this thing, and he could still walk with his front feet. So that was probably the first mechanical thing that I ever built in my life, and I was probably only about 8 years old when I did that.
Well, that's awesome. I would imagine your pup really appreciated being able to get around and you guys saving him like that.
Well, your dogs are just like your kids. They're part of your life, and I've always had a dog, and I always will. And it's just they're just part of you. And everybody has a dog knows how you feel about them.
True.
And of course, then as I got a little older, not much older, my dad had a gas lawnmower, and I took the engine off of it and made my first little soapbox car to run around the yard in and I don't even know how I did it at that age, but it would start and run and I could go around the yard in this little hot rod I made.
Awesome. And was it a lot of welding involved? Were you welding at that point?
No welding involved at all. It was just drilling holes, and it was a wooden couple 2x4s and an apple box, and then I took the sprockets off of the lawnmower, and then I don't even know how I got them all adapted up, but I made the thing work.
Excellent. And of course, you still don't have that, do you?
Oh no.
That would be quite the archive item there, But so then what happened after the go-kart? What was next?
Well, let's see. I really got started racing. My first car was a 1956 Ford, and I loved racing that car. And at the same time, my parents bought a Jeep, and I loved four-wheeling, and I loved this Jeep, and I joined the Hemet Jeep Club, and I'd go four-wheeling with the Hemet Jeep Club, and I was only 16, 17 years old then. And I just got hooked on it, and eventually put a V8 in it and started doing the club events and racing in the club events and things like that.
And that was primarily like sand drags?
Sand drags and hill climbs, and just even though it wasn't official, we'd go out on a trip and we'd see who could make it up the furthest on the hill or get up at the fastest or something. And then that was before any real professional racing events were around.
Okay. And then after, I know the Jeep, you written in history at least, is that you took the Jeep out to Glamis, and on the way home you blew the motor, and then you put a V8 in it. Is that correct?
I had a hard time keeping the stock four-cylinder running, and I did put a V8 in it, and I took an old engine out of a truck that we had in the yard, an old broken down truck, a Chevy motor, and I'll go over the whole thing with this Jeep. And it was pretty fast for having a Jeep, but I tell you, I wanted to be faster. So my brother, he's a little younger than me, he started college, and he brought a brand new 63 409. And he says he didn't want to take it to school, so he left it in my garage.
Uh-oh.
Well, I kept looking at the engine in my Jeep, and that engine is his 409. And I took them out, and I swapped those engines. Actually, I didn't even put one back in his yet. I took the engine out, put it in my Jeep. They went to that's when I surprised everybody. I went to Buttercup racing at Glamis, and they had the hill climbs there. And I had that 409, and I beat the buggies. I beat everything that was there. And the Four Wheeler magazine did a big story on it. Of course, I told them the story how I took the motor out of my brother's car. And when he came home, and he was going to get his car, he got in to start it, and it wouldn't start. He thought the battery was dead, and he picked up the hood. There was no motor. Oh, man, he was really mad. He could have killed me. We still today, my brother and I will have dinner over Thursday, and we'll talk about those things that happened then.
That's pretty awesome. So did he want the motor back after you'd raced it, or did you have to come up with something else?
No. See, the engine I took out of the truck was an old 348 engine. That's where the 409 came from. They were truck engines originally. And so we put that back in it and painted it up, and he traded off and got him a different car.
Okay, there you go. So how was your brother into off-road as well?
He got involved a little later on when I started driving for Ford. He wanted to do that. In fact, he won Baja 500 one time. I don't remember the year, but he did a little bit of racing too.
Excellent. So is there anybody back from those Hemet days that you want to, that maybe, helped mentoring or back, or, you looked up to?
I wouldn't have never been able to do it, of course, without my sidekick, Rodney Hall. And of course, Dick Simpson. He was a welder and fabricator in Hemet. He worked on my Top Fuel cars and my off-road cars later on. And then Vern Brown the three of us, between we got those three together, there wasn't anything we couldn't build.
Right, I could imagine. I could imagine. And what was Rod like back in those days?
Well, Rod and I were just really good friends, and he had a gas station, a Richfield gas station, and I was always stopping there, and we'd go to coffee or go have a beer someplace after work. But we just really became good friends.
And then eventually racing together.
Yeah, we of course belonged to the Him and Jeep Club, and we started doing the little rallies where we had obstacle courses and hill climbs and drag races, and then they started organizing some races. I remember there was a race in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and we built a Jeep for that, and we ran the Jeep there. And then Ed Perlman, we read where they were going to have the Mexican 1000. Well, Rodney and I, neither one had ever been past Tijuana, so we says, heck, let's run that. So we put this little stock Jeep together, and that was the first time we really ever did do any real off-road racing.
And how did that first experience go?
You know, if I remember right, there wasn't a lot of vehicles. I think we were 7th overall and won our class, and it took us 31 hours to do it.
Wow. That was like all the way down to Cabo, or was it a loop race?
No, you left. It started in Tijuana, and and then you took the highway down to Ensenada, and then they restarted you in Ensenada, and you went to La Paz. Okay. But you know, it's funny. Rodney and I, of course, he ran a gas station, and I worked for my dad, and neither one of us really had a lot of money, so we sent our wives, to promote us some tires and wheels so we could run that. So they went to Dick CPEC, and those two girls went down. Rodney and I didn't go, and they got us like 10 tires and wheels for the race up there. And we couldn't believe it. Didn't cost us anything. So that gave us our tires and wheels to run that race.
So they were your marketing sponsorship managers then?
Yes, they were.
That's great. And did they support you guys on the race down as well?
That's a pretty good story. But anyway, no, we figured we'd never make it down there. Well, we finally got, of course, in those days, things were pretty primitive. We got down there, we did call home and said, we made it, we're okay. Oh, that's great. Well, my dad, of course, has his own jet at that time, and he didn't say anything. And Rodney and I are down and sitting in the hotel having a beer and something, and somebody says, hey, your guys' wives are here. Well, my dad flew our wives, Rodney's wife, Donna, and my wife down there, and they surprised us by coming down.
Oh, that's a nice surprise. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And did you guys get to spend a couple of days down there extra because of that?
It was a couple of days, and one of the stories was, well, gosh, how are we going to get our Jeep home? We're going to have to drive it home, or what are we going to do? Then we heard that you can fly them home. So Rodney and I went out to the airport, and they says, yeah, it cost you $150 to fly it back to Tijuana. So we paid these guys $150, and they put it in a plane, and they had a whole lot of help, and they bodily picked this CJ5 up and put it in the side door of an airplane and flew it to Tijuana for us.
Not quite the same nowadays. $150 to fly it up.
No, it's not.
So how long did you, I know you've off-road raced almost, from that point. I don't know when was the last time you were down racing. Can you tell me that?
Gosh, the last, I'm trying to think what the last off-road race was. Well, kind of let me go through maybe a little bit of the history. Sure. After that race, well, Bill Stroppe came out to him, and he wanted Rodney and I to drive a Bronco. Well, Rodney did not want to drive a Bronco. He liked the Jeeps better than the Broncos. So at that time, we parted company, and he drove for Brian Chichua, and I started driving for Bill Stroppe. Well, I was just lucky and doing everything right, and we had a banner year driving the Broncos for Stroppe that next year. Won the Mint, the Stardust 711, the 500, the 1000, and that was in '68. And then in '69, and of course, Rodney chased me. Him and Carl Jackson chased me all year, and they never could beat me when I was in that Bronco. So the next year, Rodney wanted to drive a Bronco. So him and I decided to team up and run the 1969 1000. And that's when we won it overall in '69. So we after that, well, Rodney continued driving the four-wheel drive vehicles of production, and I moved into the pony that Bill Stroppe had built for Parnelli, and Parnelli built Big Ole then. So I drove the pony for Stroppe for many years after that, and enjoyed it. I didn't. That Parnelli was very tough to beat, and I run the same class as the Big Ole. And I remember he beat me a few times. It was tough to beat him, but I loved the pony. It rode good, and it was fast car. And I raced that until I think '77, something like that.
Wow.
And then I decided to go drag racing after that. So
Let's talk about the drag racing, from dirt to pavement.
Okay, I've always had the desire. I like speed and to go fast, and now I even was doing some pavement racing back in the 50s and the early 60s. I'd go to Colton drag strip. I had a 56 Ford, and I got me a 57 Chevy after that, and I still got a few trophies from that drag strip in Colton. But anyway, I've always had the desire to go for asphalt racing. So I built my first, when the Ford program pretty well went away from Bill Stroppe, I built me a dragster with my longtime friend that rode with me a lot in the races, Jack Bear. He was an engine builder, and he was a drag racer. And I took Jack with me on the off-road races because he's an excellent mechanic and always patch things up and get us going again so we wouldn't stay broke down. But anyway, I built my first dragster, and it was in the fall, and I wanted to drive, but I didn't have time to get my driver's license, and I wanted to run the Winter Nationals that were coming up. Well, anyway, Jack Bear says, well, I know Larry Bowers real well. We'll get Larry Bowers to drive your car there. He's got a Top Fuel license. So we went to Pomona the weekend before. We went to Orange County the weekend before Pomona and put Larry Bowers in the car so he could get a few passes on it. Well, he smoked the tires and stayed in it, and then hit the guardrail, and then went to the other side of the track, hit the other guardrail, went upside down, threw him out of the car, broke both arms and a leg or two, and it was a mess. And it was at night, and it was fire and everything. Well, after that, my family says, Larry, my wife and kids says, you'll never drive one of those cars. You know, if you continue this, you'll never drive. But anyway, I wanted to still race, so we rebuilt the car, and that's when I got Larry Dixon to drive. And he drove a couple years for me. And then we were doing good running division races, but we weren't national event contenders yet. Well, Steve Gibbs, who is the race director for NHRA, says, Larry, we've been watching your program and we like what we see. You do a good job at running your program. We could bring you a guy that could take you to the next level to win national events. So they brought Gary Beck to me, and I hired Gary Beck to drive my dragster. And you know, then we'd gotten a few laps in a couple of years of racing and no accidents or anything. So I just still had the desire to drive. So I built Gary a new car, and I drove his old car in '82. And then in '83, we won the world championship with Gary driving. That was our first world championship in Top Fuel. It just, and I enjoyed driving. I didn't really care to win the world championship, but I loved driving and making changes on the cars and things like that. And then I didn't really have any desire to go get major sponsors or anything like that for my racing, but I was walking down pit road at Orange County at the World Finals, and these two guys came up and I says, are you Larry Miner? I says, yes, sir, I am. He says, I'm Dave Gerard. This is Tom Erb. We're from Oldsmobile, and we want to get into drag racing, and we want to be with you. And I said, gosh, guys, I don't have a driver. I don't have a car. I don't have a transporter. They say, we will give you the resources to do it. Oh, man, really? So anyway, we went on the hood of my truck, pounded out an agreement, and few days went by, and I knew, so I got a hold of Ed McCullough, and I heard Ed was looking for a ride, and I said, "You want to come and drive for me next year?" Ed, heck yeah, I'll drive a car. So, okay, this means I got to put everything together. Well, word travels in the race world a lot, and so I got a call about a week later from Miller Brewing Company, Chris Moore, who was the president. He says, "We hear, Larry, you put a deal with Oldsmobile, and Ed McCullough is going to drive your car. We want to be your major sponsor to Miller Beer." It says,
Nice.
"Really?" He says, "We want to sponsor the off-road truck that you and Parnelli Jones drives." I was driving an off-road truck then, and John Nelson was keeping it prepared. He built the truck and everything. And he said, "We want to sponsor your top fuel dragster you drive, the top fuel dragster Gary Beck drives, and the funny car that Ed McCullough is going to drive." So I had to get in my plane, fly back to, I guess it was Milwaukee, and put a deal together with those guys.
Wow. That's nice when somebody like that calls.
Yeah, I was just a lucky guy. I was at the right place at the right time, and I was always dedicated to what I was doing, to win races. And I was always the kind of guy to hire the best people I could to work around you. That's something my dad taught me. He says, "Larry, always surround yourself with good people because they'll make you look good."
Right. And, it's interesting. I've done a couple of ORMHOF inductees like yourself, and John Nelson's name keeps coming up.
He was a very good fabricator. I remember I hadn't started driving I missed a little part of my off-road there when we switched to drag, but I hadn't started driving the top fuel car yet, but I missed racing. So I went to Walker Evans, and Walker had his own shop, and I had him build me a Chevy truck. I mean, full out. And John Nelson was the fabricator that built that truck. Well, when I took delivery of the truck, I says, "Walker, I'm going to need somebody to maintain this thing. What about John? Do you care if I hire John to come to work for me?" And Walker says, "No, take him, because this is as high as he ever going to go in my business." So then I hired John Nelson. He came over, and of course, he's my off-road fabricator and mechanic for years. And even after I quit driving and Parnelli quit driving the truck, we got Steve Kelly to drive for us.
Nice. Nice little tight group.
Yeah. And John was a heck. He built my pre-runners and everything for us. He's a heck of a fabricator.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I just got his phone number and talked to him about being on one of the episodes. So I'm looking forward to that. He's got quite a history as yourself. And so now when you got into the Miller program and Oldsmobile drag racing, how did that turn out for you guys?
Well, it turned out really good. Well, I mean, Oldsmobile stuck with me for the 14 years that I raced my cars. The Oldsmobile stayed right with me, and I had Miller for 9 years, and that went away. And then I had Otter Pops. Knew Paul Pope. He owned the Otter Pops. They're little sugar flavored water popsicles. He sponsored my cars for a while, and then I heard McDonald's wanted to get into drag racing, so I put a deal together with McDonald's.
So no French fries, but go fast.
With a lot of help from Jim Williams. Jim Williams owned Golden State Foods, and they were a big supplier of McDonald's. They supplied all of the food and stuff for the McDonald's restaurants, and with his help and all that, I put that deal together with McDonald's with Ed Renzi.
Nice. I can remember watching drag racing on Wild World of Sports and watching the McDonald's car. That's the one I do remember.
And we had a banner year with the first year with McDonald's in '92. Gosh, I tell you, I think we won 5 races that year with both cars at the same race, the dragster and the funny car, plus other races. And we won the world championship with Cruz as a rookie. So,
and
Cruz
that's
Pendergast.
Pendergast, right. And talk about that association and how that came about.
Actually, Joe Paisano says, I have this guy that's really, it'd be a good driver, Larry. He really wants to drive a top fuel car. He's driven alcohol cars and things like that. So Cruz showed up at my shop door one day and says, I hear you're looking for a driver. I want to drive one of your cars. He says, I'll work for nothing. I don't have nothing to hold me back. And I got a class 1 license. I can drive your diesel rigs and everything. So I went and put a deal together with Cruz, and we became really good friends and won a lot of races.
That's awesome. So, and he drove the transporter too?
No, I think most of my guys all had a class 1 license. So when we did travel, we traveled 24 hours a day. Like if we're going to go to California or Gainesville, they had it down in hours, how many hours it was going to take them. And I had in the transporter, I had a little living quarters back there. So some of the guys that were traveling could rest and sleep, and then they'd swap drivers every so many hours.
Right. That makes sense. Especially when you're trying to get from race to race, weekend to weekend.
Yes.
And did you ever drive the top fuel down the course yourself? Did you take that quarter-mile run?
Oh, yeah. I started driving in 81 or 82.
Okay.
We called them the 2 blue cars that Gary Beck and I drove that. And actually, I won a couple races, national events. I won Baton Rouge one year, and I won the Mile High Nationals one year. Very good. Awesome. It was always, in those days, they didn't have they called me a blocker a lot of times, but, I could, if I had to come and race Gary, I would either leave the car in the pits or be late on the light or do something so Gary could win.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, if you guys are teaming up together and he, he's running all the time, I guess, or popping off more wins. And if you face him, it could hurt the standings. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I drove a top fuel car from, I think it was 81 to 88. That was the last year I drove. I drove the Miller car, and then I drove I drove one of the Miller dragsters, and in 88, I quit driving. My dad passed away then, and I says, I better not, I'm the guy that's in charge. I better really buckle down and watch the business a little better and quit the driving part of it.
Well, that makes sense. I've heard that from a couple of others as well that had businesses that depended on them. So then becoming a team, just the team owner at that point, it was Larry Minor Motorsports. You guys produced product as well for other racers?
Not really the top fuel stuff. We came up with some things that were like the Pete Jackson barrel valve. We were one of the first ones to do that on our cars. I know Bernie Fedley came to me one day. I'd go down to the shop, and Bernie says, Larry, there's some new products out there we need to look at. And he says, this Pete Jackson makes a barrel valve. I says, well, good, go buy a couple. Well, Larry, you just don't go buy a couple of his barrel valves. He takes you and he wants the whole class with you. So we all got in a car and we drove down to Pete Jackson's, and this barrel valve was $7,500 for one barrel valve. Because then you could buy a whole Enderley injector for probably $600, something like that.
Right.
But anyway, we went through and put that barrel valve on, and then the quick change rear ends. It's in not the quick change, but the live axle rear ends that are in the dragsters now.
Right.
I got that idea. We had a lot of tire shake before they had those live axle rear ends, and when it starts multiplying, when you have 4 different splines working against each other, when they go start a tire shake, it multiplies itself. Well, I can remember when we were off-road racing and Parnelli built the big Ole car, we had problems out there with losing the rear end because the Ford rear end, the housing would move a little bit and the gasket would come out. We'd lose all the oil and it'd burn up the ring and pinion. Well, Parnelli went to Henry's Machine Works and designed a live axle rear end that was aluminum and everything. And I remembered that. And I called Parnelli and he put me in touch with Henry's, and they released all the patterns for that stuff. And I took them to Steve Chrisman, and that's when he built the first live axle rear end for a top fuel car. And I wouldn't I know Joe Amato wanted them, everybody wanted them, but I wouldn't let anybody have any. We kept Chrisman just built them for our cars.
No reason giving away the farm on that one, so to speak, huh?
No, and then eventually Strange copied it because there was a patent on it. They have to change it 15%, and whatever they did, they made it a top loader live axle. But so Strange builds one too. But Chrisman still builds that rear end for the 20 cars and the top fuel cars.
And now more than one team has it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you think was the most defining moment in your racing career, whether it was off-road, sand, pavement? Is there one moment where you just went, wow, we made it?
No, you work so hard at it. It was all about winning and making your car better and faster than anybody else, and your off-road car faster. And I'm a freak about weight to horsepower ratio. And so I always built really good motors for my off-road cars, all aluminum motors, and put out like 900 horsepower, which was a lot of horsepower back in those days. And so, I always, all my equipment we built just like that. And then, of course, later on, the only stuff I ever put out on the market that I'd already quit racing was the Glamis sand Jeeps. When I quit racing, my kids wanted to go to Glamis, and they were very young then, 12, 14 years old. And Sandy and my wife and I had a Jeep. And later on, my boys says, it's time you get off your quad, and I'll build you a Jeep like mine, or you can have mine. My son, Andy, says, Dad, I don't want a Jeep unless you can make it long travel with King shocks on it. So I sat down at my desk with a graph paper, and I designed this Jeep. I took all the knowledge I had in drag racing and all the knowledge that I'd got in off-road racing, designed this Jeep. And I built my kids one, I built myself one. So just my family had them. And everybody says, oh, we want one of those Jeeps, one of those Jeeps. I ended up building 40 of those darn things.
Wow. That's awesome. And do you still follow all of the racing, the different types?
Yeah, I'd say pretty much. I talk to Tony and Cruz all the time. In fact, my son's wife, Sarah, she's a Girl Scout leader. She has 8, 9-year-old Girl Scouts, and she called me up and says, Larry, do you think you can get us to, we're doing auto mechanics and we're making these Pinewood Derbies. Do you think you can get us some tickets to the NHRA Winter Nationals out here? And I said, well, yeah, I think so. So I call up NHRA, and they says, Larry, I think you can qualify for our YES program. It's Youth Educational Services. So I ended up, and I fit in, I ended up renting a party bus. I took 18 Girl Scouts and 13 parents to the Winter National this year.
Wow, that must have been quite the show for those young girls.
Oh, and Cruz was so good to them. He set them down in his pit area and give them a little talk. And then they wanted to meet Leah Pruitt because my daughter-in-law's mother taught Leah Pruitt in 4th grade. She was a school teacher. And so we went over and introduced ourselves to Leah, and Leah came out and talked to all the girls and all that. And I tell you, they had a great time. Then Tony Pedregon came down. He took all the girls up in the announcing tower and everything. It was really a good weekend for them.
Well, they got the full treatment.
Yes. And that program that NHRA does, Youth Educational Service, that's a great program. I didn't realize it was such a great program because when you enter at the back of the track, and they got a huge tent set up, and there's about 200 chairs in there, and they set the kids down there, and then they have a businessman, a marketing man, a mechanic, and a driver. They had Bob Tasca there as a driver, and they tell these kids, you got to start out the bottom. You can't start at the top. How you have to work your way up in any kind of business or racing.
I think that's something that's lost on most of our youth nowadays. I get the impression that so many kids look at what their parents have and expect that that's, when they start off with their first job, that's what they're going to have. And they don't understand that it's a ladder process.
They don't really realize how much their parents put into getting where they are today. It just does. You just don't start at the top. There's a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment.
Yes. And I just wish we could instill that more so in our youth today. Hopefully, we'll swing the pendulum will swing back toward that kind of philosophy being taught.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I was really surprised. I was always my dad when I was a little kid. He loved to take us camping, so we learned how to start a campfire and all that. I go to Glamis and I was really shocked how many people did not know how to start a campfire.
Right?
Unless they have a can of gasoline, they can't start it.
Yeah, and then they light the dune on fire.
Yes.
So many people, and one good friend of mine that he did the whole gas can on the fire thing and tried to light his backyard on fire along with furniture and everything else. So when he listens to this, he'll understand what who I'm talking about. But anyway, it does amaze me. I went through Scouts, so building a campfire was second nature after doing it the first time and doing it over and over and over again. And I tried to instill that in my kids, and hopefully that happened. But everybody grows up differently.
I'm glad you mentioned Scouts. I wish every kid, boys and girls, would go through scouting because they teach you so much at a young age. And there's one thing that I always remembered, that one of our mottos in Boy Scouts is be prepared. That's always stuck with me, and I've always tried to keep myself prepared for anything.
True, very true. Yeah, scouting has definitely changed and become less important in young kids' life, whether it's Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, and it's kind of a shame. It really is. But enough of that. So let's talk more about your relationship with some of the racers, and let's talk about off-road and the who besides those that you talked about, like Rod Hall and Stroppe, were instrumental in developing your off-road career.
Well, of course, like I mentioned before, actually Bill Stroppe probably had more to do with it than anything. He taught me the professional part of racing and how to prepare your cars. I tell you, I remember I would go down to Signal Hill and see Bill on the weekends, and he would be in the back steam cleaning these Broncos. I says, Bill, you got guys that work for you. Why can't they be doing that after the race? He says, Larry, I do this because I can look and see where the weak point or if they're breaking any place in it. So he was a hands-on guy, and he taught me a lot about the off-road racing. So, and of course, there's Rodney and John Nelson and Dickie Simpson and Vern Brown. They were all part of my life in the off-road racing.
Is there a special place in Baja for you? Meaning, some people will tell me, oh, it's the Bay of LA or this or that. Myself, I like the little spit at Buenaventura. Is there a place like that you enjoy?
No, not really. There's some beautiful spots down there and all, but there's nothing that attracts me to where I'd say I'd want to have a place down there or anything like that. I enjoyed racing down there, enjoyed meeting a lot of people on the road and everything, but I would not want to live any place there.
Okay, fair enough. And what did you think when you got inducted into ORMHOF?
The off-road?
Yeah, the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame.
Oh, God, it was such an honor. And Rodney and I were inducted the same time. It's great. And I know Rodney was very instrumental in putting that Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame program together. And that's when he asked, and I actually donated some money so he could get started doing that. And it was just such a great honor, and seeing all the people there. And then I know I sponsored Herman Booy, getting him inducted into it. And that's what one guy I forgot to mention is how much a part of off-road racing Herman Booy was. I remember I built a sprint car one time, single-seater to race in Mexico and off-road racing. And I was a freak about keeping it light. So I carried chartered a helicopter, and I had Herman Booy, because he's a good mechanic, as my mechanic, and he would fly in the helicopter with a spare tire and all the tools if we broke down. And Roger Mears and I we took turns driving that thing, and it was really a fast car and fun to drive. But we didn't win any races with it, but we had fun driving.
Were there any races out there? Because I mean, you were racing before GPS. How did was it just the signage on the road, or on the track, or did you guys have a map drawn out? What was the process of getting from point A to point B?
Well, like the first race, Rodney, I'll go back and start when we first raced. We'd never been beyond Tijuana and never pre-run or anything. So we took a compass and we just kept going south till we'd hit water. And I remember we pulled into El Arco, and it was about midnight, and that the pit crew says, well, Stroppe and Harvick is about 2 hours ahead of you. So Rodney and I all at that time said, we're tired of this survival mode. We're going to go into the race mode. So we unloaded spare tires, tools, everything out of that Jeep, let the air pressure down, and we just drove it with everything we could. And it was just about daybreak. And here we met Stroppe coming the opposite way. And so we stopped and talked to him. And Stroppe says, you guys are going the wrong way. And I says, well, my compass says south. We're going south. Stroppe says, there's a magnetic interference here, and it's messing up your compass. And I said, well, I don't think so, but that's what you believe. We're going on. So anyway, Rodney and I took off. We didn't know it. When Stroppe and Harvick went to take off, they were high-centered in some ruts, and they were stuck. And Stroppe always accused us of leaving them there stuck, but we didn't know he was stuck. But anyway, that's the only thing we had was a compass, and kept going south till we got to the Villa Constitucion, and it was paved road from there to La Paz. We knew that. So
that's interesting. I heard a story one time listening to Ivan Stewart, and he was talking about racing in Baja pre-GPS, and it was him and Walker. His story was about him and Walker, and he had seen lights, and Walker, saw lights. Well, they were looking at each other's lights across the valley, and I guess they were up on either, mountainside, and so they kind of started heading toward each other. And when they met up, neither one of them knew which direction they were supposed to go.
And Stroppe, after that, when I started driving for him, we went down and did a lot of pre-running, and pre-run from one end to the other and do it backwards. And then he made these maps of the thing, and the co-driver would scroll it. They were on a scroll, and you'd scroll this map along all the way. And I remember Jack Bear and I were flying for the finish line in the 1000, going into La Paz, and there was nobody. Only one that was ahead of us with a motorcycle, Berquist and Preston. And I looked, and it's like 3 a.m, and there's cows crossing the road. And I said, holy cow, what am I going to do? So anyway, I tried centering myself and hitting the rear end of one of them and the front of the other one. And I managed to keep the Broncos straight when I hit them at the same time. And it spun them cows. I don't know whether I killed them or what, but it spun them around. And we went straight through them. And I slapped old Bear. I says, Bear, help me watch out for these cows on the road. And he says, look, there ain't no cows on this map.
No cows on the map.
Yeah. But that map really helped us a lot. Of course, going down and pre-running after that, we got to know the country pretty good.
Yeah, pre-running is nowadays especially seems to be very, very important. It wasn't just, nowadays it's not, just get down there and kind of follow the compass. I mean, with the electronics and everything, they pretty much want you to stay on track or you get penalized. And I think that's a big change, but it also probably helps the locals and stuff because, there's a lot more people down there now.
Yes, I know we had a lot of fun pre-running. Of course, it was Ack Miller and Ray Brock, a whole Stroppe team, and Jim Garner. We got to know Jim real well, and there was Walker along with all the whole 4 team. We'd all pre-run. I can remember one time we were Ack Miller and Ray Brock, they were driving a truck with a welder in it, and they're supposed to set up the pit for Stroppe at El Arco. And anyway, we were at Santa Ynez, and I tell you, it was Santa Ynez. But anyway, they'd have to, Ray Brock and Ack Miller would have to leave way early in the morning to get to the next place where we're going to spend the night. And so I think Jack Bear was with me. So we drove like heck and caught up to him one day and waved them down. They were about 20 miles ahead of everybody else. And I says, hey, Stroppe wants you to go back. Loomis broke his front end in half in his Bronco, and they need the welder to fix it. Oh man, really? Yeah. So anyway, he turned around and went back, which this was all a joke.
Oh, geez.
And I tell you, I remember we all got into, maybe it was San Ignacio was the next place we got into, San Ignacio. And we were all asleep in this big dormitory. And I heard Ray Brock coming and Ack Miller, where's that damn miner? Where's that miner at? We're going to get that guy. Because they had to go back. And then, when they caught up, Bet Stroppe him coming away, he says, where's Loomis? We got to weld up his rear. And he says, he's okay. That's all that miner.
That's some great stories.
No, we had a lot of fun, I tell you.
That's a great story right there. I mean, I don't know if the people racing nowadays have those kind of stories. Everybody's got stories, but those are the great ones. Those early days when everything was just new. There wasn't a history to go off of.
I know a good friend of mine just ran the old Nora Nostalgia 1000. They just had it here a couple weeks ago.
Right. And
I think they won their class. His name was Gary Howell, and he drove a Bronco. And he mentioned Ed Perlman. And I don't know what, I guess I said, well, look, if you see Ed, go up and give him a big hug and tell him I said hello. Well, it was Ed's son that was running it. I'm not sure that Ed himself is still alive. If he is, he's in his 90s someplace. He's a few years older than I am. So.
Right. I think you're right. I'm not sure that he's still alive. That's something that I'll have to look into.
Yeah, but he was a great guy to have leading our sport,
And are you in any other Hall of Fames, like maybe drag racing?
Yeah, I was inducted into the NHRA Drag Racing Hall of Fame down in Ocala, Florida, with Don Gartlett's in 2020.
Very good. And I would imagine that was a pretty heartfelt honor as well.
Oh, it was a big honor. Of course, when it was nice that my whole family came down with me, and I got to see a lot of people that I haven't seen in a long time. It was including Don Gartlett. Even though Don and I never raced together, we stayed good friends. And I remember when he started his Hall of Fame and the monument he has out in front, he needed money for it. And so I donated the money to buy that. But I did in a deal. I was always involved in community projects, and there was one they called it the Grad Night. It's where they cook hamburgers and everything for the kids so they're not out on the street on graduation night. Well, I says, Don, I'll donate the money to you if you'll come out and sign autographs at the high school Grad Night reunion thing. And so he came out and did that for me. So,
wow, that's awesome. That's great. And your family, your sons, did they get into racing at all?
My boys raced a little bit. When I quit racing, I let them have my off-road truck and stuff. They did that a little bit, but they found out how much work it was and how expensive it was to keep the thing running and doing all that. And they didn't want to work on it themselves, so that kind of phased away. But my son, he does have my last drag car that I race in the sand. He runs that now, and Corey Mack drives it, who used to drive my Top Fuel car for me. So it's a real fast car. It's tuned by Bob DeVore, who's a NHRA tuner, and he'd been around for a long time. It's got a Brad Anderson blown alcohol fat head in it, and It's in a Jeep, one of my sand Jeeps, but it's lowered with no suspension. It's got a Chrisman rear end in it and a B&J trans, and it runs 100 yards in 3.6 seconds at 135.
Wow. That's amazing in the sand because
So
you're
my
not
son
getting the
Chris still
traction.
does. Yeah. So my son Chris, he runs that program. So
Excellent. Excellent. And any plans? Have you been to any of the induction ceremonies, galas recently?
no, I have not. So
Okay. Is there a possibility we may see you someday at one of them?
I hope so. Jamie Martinez's son, and Jamie used to ride with me. He worked for Bill Stroppe. I don't know whether he's getting inducted this year or not. But I'd have to talk to Barbara. But I know I wrote a letter on his behalf and how important these co-drivers were to us drivers. Us guys as drivers, them guys sit next to us, they're the real stars because they have to fix the car and ride with somebody if they don't know what he's going to do next.
Yeah, you're kind of putting your hands into your life into somebody else's hands. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're the real heroes in this off-road racing.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for spending the time and talking to us about your history, the family history, the farm, the off-road, everything that you've done, the drag racing. It's absolutely amazing that you've encompassed so much. And I want to say thank you for that. And I want to say I hope I get a chance to meet you in person. It would be a great honor for me to do that. And someday maybe that'll happen. And Larry, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Rich. Anytime you call me, anytime, you got my number.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right. You take care. Bye. Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.